Um, I'm making this video partially because I normally don't sleep for any more than 3 or 4 hours at a time anyway. Um, and with people exposed to the toxic water at Camp Lejeune military base, difficulty sleeping, cancer, problems with the womb, and all kinds of stuff. It's skin issues is part of various symptoms. So I don't know if it has anything to do with that or not, but I don't stay asleep for any more than 3 or 4 hours at a time normally either. If I get lucky, I might have a normal sleep cycle, but normally my sleep is very broken and interrupted. And right now, I just feel a tremendous amount of stress because there's a specific person who really does have a very strong demonic attachment. And that specific person has been very, very aggressive about trying to go out of their way to cross paths with me, like almost every day. And right before Rosh Hashanah, it started at sunset of this evening. And right before Rosh Hashanah started at sunset for this evening, that person was just really exaggerating a lot of things and really trying to recruit other people into forcing me into homelessness again. That person's been working on it with increasing frequency every single day. And yesterday before sunset, which was the start of Rosh Hashanah, that's kind of when everything kind of came to a head with that person who does have a strong demonic attachment, trying to wield and abuse power to force me to have no home and also disenrolled from my online class. And I can't really say anything about who it is because it's a white person. I can't say anything about who it is openly because it's a woman, but it's a woman who has a very, very powerful demonic attachment. And I don't know what her faith is. I don't know what she believes or what she practices. But I do know that probably on the first sunrise of Rosh Hashanah, which is tomorrow, which is Sunday, or possibly on day 2 of Rosh Hashanah, which is Monday, this woman who has a very, very strong demonic attachment, who's been coming at me more and more aggressively every day leading up to this point, everything might come to a head with her trying to use others to make me homeless and to force me to disenroll from my online class. It all might come to a head tomorrow on Sunday or on Monday morning. And I'm tired because I've been through issues like this over and over and over again. And if I try to get help from anyone, that's only going to make it worse because they're not going to help me. They're only going to make excuses to justify what she's doing. And furthermore, in the Bible, the apostles did divination to select Judas as replacement. In the Bible, name and numerology is in the book of Revelation. And this woman who has a strong demonic attachment, the Jewish gematria value for her husband's name is 666. I'm not making it up. I put her husband's name into a calculator, and the value for his name, it yields 666. And I'm not saying he's an evil person. I'm not saying that. I had a female childhood best friend who had that numeric value for her first name. You know, I had a very good friend with that numeric value. So I'm not saying everybody who has 666 for their Jewish gematria name, I'm not saying that they're all inherently evil. The problem with them is that they're individuals who tend to kind of be heavily imbalanced toward their family to the point where they barely see anything clearly outside of that. And I just, I even had a pastor, right before the pandemic started, I even had a pastor to tell me that the number one way to get no help is to tell people what happens to me. And he was basically telling me, and I knew that what he was saying was correct. I knew it. I even had a situation where an individual who had all kinds of demonic photos all over their Facebook profile was openly admitting to me in writing on Facebook that they were spreading lies about me and threatening to shoot me. And some of the people in their friends list was people at the church. And nobody cared about my feelings. Nobody cared about my emotional health. Nobody cared about what was being done to me every single day. The only thing they cared about was them just feeling that they wanted me to shut the fuck up. It's like if you're not, there's so much more that could be said. There's so much more that could be said, but I really need help, and there's no one I can ask for help on any level. Not in a church, not in, not in law enforcement. People, they can openly worship demons, go to church every Sunday, and admit in writing on Facebook that they're spreading shit about me that's not true and threatening to shoot me in the head. And when I tried to communicate to one lady who has a strong demonic attachment, who I was talking about in the beginning of the video, I was telling her about that and some other situations because I wanted to make it clear that there are a lot of things that makes this town an unsafe place, especially for any person who is under spiritual attack or any person who does not show passive agreement. And when I was telling her what was about these types of things, trying to make it clear to her why I felt unsafe, she twisted it around saying that I was threatening to kill people. The lady who has the strong demonic attachment. And again, I can't go to a pastor about problems like this. I can't go to law enforcement for a problem like this. If I tried to attempt to confront the spirit in her, then what they would probably do is call me a witch and say that I did something to her. What they would probably do is that they would say, well, you're indigenous, and your approach to connecting with Yeshua and the Creator, it's not close enough to alignment with the European way that has very little to do with Israel. So for that reason alone, we're going to go ahead and decide that you're a witch. You caused this lady's spiritual problem, and you just got to be homeless or go to jail or a mental institution. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the outcome if I attempted an exorcism on that lady and failed at it. And the problem with issues like that is that when people are in a physical relationship together, all the spirits that are inside of you, they have access to the person you're having sex with. So it's a messy issue when it's a person who has one or more sex partners. Just clearing one is not an answer to the problem, because that spirit influence, it has access to all of them. And it's a very dangerous situation. I'm not a professional. I barely even have all the answers to my own spiritual path. I barely, if I had better, more reliable knowledge of how to combat stuff like that, I wouldn't have been forced into homelessness multiple times by people who openly admit that they're gay and bisexual Satan worshipers who really do like to weaponize women. I wouldn't have been forced into homelessness multiple times by people who are like that if I really had all the answers to my intensive spiritual study. And, if I had all the answers, they wouldn't have been in a position to beat me down and hurt my children after taking them away from me. I'm not talking about people in the state I live in. I've encountered this issue in multiple states, and it's like 9 times out of 10, I can always see it coming when a spirit like that is going to send someone against me to force me into homelessness again. And I've had this issue over and over and over again for 7 years. And I don't know where to go. Church prophets, they don't address problems like this. A lot of prophetic churches, they've had church members who are involved with human sacrifice cults, like the Ku Klux Klan, which is a human sacrifice cult that kills people of color and offers the souls to Dionysus. The church had many human sacrifice cult members of the Ku Klux Klan for many years. And did their alleged Holy Spirit reveal that to them? No. Not only was it not revealed, they never even apologized for it. There's video evidence of Ku Klux Klan members who were doing their Dionysus rituals on Stone Mountain in Stone Mountain, Georgia. And it's video evidence that they were they're secretly Dionysus worshipers. And did a Holy Spirit reveal it in the church? No. Did a Holy Spirit push the church to apologize for covering up for Dionysus human sacrifice participants because it's their relatives, their neighbors, and their friends? No. There's satanic cults full of white people that sacrifice white children. I know that people of color committed that culture, and all it led to was disaster, poverty, and oppression for people of color. And there's people in the white community still doing that stuff now. And, I met one prophetic pastor. He was a retired police chief. He had to change his name and move his family and everything because he was even getting death threats just by doing small. They were threatening to kill him just for doing small stuff like trying to advocate for his neighbors and peers to do things in a more civilized way. And he wasn't even exposing like any of the heavier stuff like what I'm talking about. He was just trying to advocate for a more civilized approach to people of color, because the reality is a lot of Black people were already here before slavery started. All these pyramids, it's 70 pyramids in Ohio. There's many stone pyramids in South America. It's a lot of stone pyramids in Mexico. There's ancient stone statues of wide-nosed, thick-lipped Black people all up through South America. I mean, Black people, a lot of us were already here before they started showing up with Africans. And on top of that, the Asiatic natives, a lot of them were labeled Black and sold into slavery illegally. And that's something a lot of people don't know, that slave plantations, a lot of them had the darker skinned Indians who looked more similar to Black people working on the slave plantations throughout the Americas and Puerto Rico. And some of them were even sold to the Cape Verde Islands in Africa. Like some of the natives from Canada who was sold to Cape Verde Islands in Africa, that's who I'm descended from. In addition to being descended from tribes of Florida and North Carolina. So with that said, as Indigenous people like myself who do have ancestry from the Black pyramids of North and South America, or maybe both the pyramid builders and the Asiatic tribes too. People like myself, we don't get respected as Indigenous people. The only thing we're allowed to do is show passive agreement or be forced to leave, or worse. That's what it is a lot of times. And we're not the majority. Like, we're less than 12% of the population. And if you in a calm manner state that we are less than 12% of the population, the response to that is usually anger, especially from a female. They get angry because, they have all these men who are afraid. They don't speak up for anybody. And they've also brainwashed other men into thinking that we're the majority, when the fact is we're not. We're treated like strangers in our own homeland. There's tribes that traditionally did not live in our territories, and then they move in and they're treated like they have rights to everything karmically. And that's very cruel. That is very, very cruel. One good example of that is like Mexicans. They the Spanish European Mexicans, they mass murdered Geronimo's entire Bedonkohe tribe before he became Chiricahua. His wife died, his mother died, and all of his children died. The men were drinking and partying with the Spanish European women, and the Mexican mestizo women, who was Spanish European mixed. The men were drinking and partying with those women in town, while very, very few were guarding the women and kids at their camp. And all the women and children were killed or enslaved. And for Geronimo's family, his wife, mother, and kids, they were all killed. They were not lucky enough to be taken as slaves. And so with that said, in the old days, there were some serious problems there. And I'm aware of this because my two youngest sons, their biological dad, he's a white Mexican with light brown eyes, who's descended from Geronimo through the Rios family on his mother's side. And a lot of people who are of Apache descent, whether they're Black or Mexican or whatever, they know that a lot of people in the Rios family, they're descended from Geronimo. And two youngest sons, that's how their dad is related. And that's how I had the story pointed out to me. And their dad, he said that a lot of the issues that we face today, it's really not a whole lot different from what was going on in the old days. But in my case, there's a spiritual component to that as well. And if I had all the answers to how to deal with people who have very strong demonic attachments, who weaponize others to push me into homelessness over and over and over again, who have been doing it for 7 years, if I had all the answers on how to deal with that, it wouldn't have taken me this long to find my own home. And the fact of the matter is, if I fail to figure out how to address a specific person who does have a very strong demonic attachment, then I'm not gonna, a person who has a lot of influence, a lot of sway, while I have none, the only thing I get is, like I said, having things that I say twisted or exaggerated or, or just outright attitudes. And it's no accident that here it is, yesterday started at Rosh Hashanah started at sunset, and that person had to get more active and more aggressive yesterday, right before Rosh Hashanah, trying to make sure that others are weaponized against me to try to make sure that my homelessness is finalized tomorrow on day 1 of Rosh Hashanah, which is a Sunday, or on Monday. If I don't figure out how to address this, I'm just gonna have to leave where I'm at, cancel my online class, possibly maybe lose everything that I own if I don't find a way to handle that, because I've been confronted with that in so many places. And everybody who's like that, they're not always going to openly admit that they have that issue. Normally, only Satan worshipers are going to openly admit it in writing, on Facebook and on text messages and all kind of stuff. But when it's people who's not Satan worshipers, they're not going to openly admit that they're operating under the influence of a strong demonic attachment. They're not going to admit that shit in writing or on Facebook or nothing. Like, Satan worshipers, they can say whatever the fuck they want to say to me and put it in writing on social media or text messages, and nobody does anything. Nobody fucking cares. It's like they're always painted as the victim. And that's a part of white supremacy too. Like, yes, there's spiritual issues from people of color because they already made all the mistakes that a white community is making now. People of color, they already did it. White people, they're just new to having their turn to do all that shit wrong. And I just don't know of a safe place among people of my own race. I don't know of a safe place among people of other races. I just don't know. Because the fact of the matter is, all it takes is one carefully selected person. And the minute it's go time on them from them higher level demons, it's like, boom, then I have no home again. That's the number one reason why I don't live in Florida right now. That's why I don't live in Colorado right now. It's why I don't live in California anymore. It's why I don't live in North Dakota anymore. And if I attempt an exorcism in front of, security cameras or whatever, that adds nothing. that adds nothing to benefit me socially because I have no social status. I have no access to balanced mediation. I don't have that. I don't have access to getting help from law enforcement. And if I don't know the right way to do an exorcism and I get it wrong, you know, if I get it wrong to the point of danger manifesting, like what typically happens when Christians do it, then that means I could get hurt or killed if I try it based on the things I learned in books. And if the things I learned in books don't work, and that means that thing's gonna manifest in her or another person and kill my ass. Or worse yet, it might do some destruction and then have me getting blamed for it, and then my ass end up in jail.